It's Chelsea.
It's Nina.
And you're in the Critics' Kingdom.
Hello, everyone. This week we're going to be doing Quints, the 2000 DCOM starring our fave, Kimberly J. Brown.
Yeah, and some also special appearances by a pretty also renowned cast. Chelsea, you probably know these names better than I do, but Craig from Degrassi.
Yes.
And old girl from Color of Friendship.
Shadia Simmons.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm bad with the names, y'all. I know it's terrible, but that's just what it is. But yeah, this is this is probably not like a classic. It might be just because of the nature of Kimberly J. Brown and when it came out. But I know that I feel like it gets lost in like the big shuffle of conversations about DCOMs and like the top, 10 or so. But I know for a fact that I really appreciated this one because I found a diary entry from when I was like 8. And it's crazy because when I started reading this diary entry, like the moment of writing it down immediately came back to me. And like the memory of like where I was, it happened to be on like my babysitter's bed because we technically shared a room. But I guess I was home from school one day because school was out and Quints was on. And in this diary entry, I wrote about how upset I was with my babysitter for not letting me watch Quints because she wanted to watch her soaps, which she watched every single day. And Quints is hardly ever on, and it's my favorite movie of all time. And it's just the one time that I want to watch it on the TV in the living room, and she won't let me. And so, yeah, I despise her. That was the gist of that particular diary entry at 8 years old. So clearly this movie had a big place in my heart when I was younger. And I thought I'd share that with you guys.
Yeah, no, I definitely remembered enjoying this movie. I didn't really remember it as well because I think what you said is true that it does tend to get lost in the shuffle with other DCOMs. I think also because of when it came out, like as we've said before, the 98 to like 03, 04 period was like Disney's like golden era for DCOMs. So I feel like there were so many that were coming out. It was just like it was overwhelming. So yeah, I enjoyed it though. I remember I thought this one was fun.
Yeah, so I guess with that, just dive right on into the recap. So, like we said, the stars Kimberly J. Brown. She plays Jamie, 13-year-old only child at the start of the film, who, she's a fun narrator. That's important. Like we get a lot of bits of, fake outs of, oh, like you think this really happened? And she sort of, narrates it and it's very cute. But she's an only child to two parents who, clearly working class, but who have very, very high hopes for their daughter and who kind of think she's spectacular and she's very much the center of their world. And, therefore that comes with a certain amount of pressure. So we sort of just start off seeing like what her life was before what happens, which is that her mother ultimately gets pregnant with quintuplets and has 5 babies at once. So we see that, like she's trying to get into, hopefully for high school, this like GW magnet school. And, her grades are maybe not quite where they need to be. Like we see her doing like a report card thing with her 2 best friends. And like one of them, Craig, his name is Brad in this. He gets like all A's and she, doesn't necessarily get any A's. And then her other friend, who I actually don't remember what her name is in the movie. Shadia. We're just going to call her Shadia. Yeah, we're just going to call her Shadia.
Yeah, I actually can't remember her name
by her real name. She gets like, 1 or 2 A's, I think, and then B's and such.
Zoe. Her name is Zoe.
There we go. But Zoe's Zoe is also really into art club. And, the art teacher sort of stops by and he's like, oh, Jamie, like you should try out for art. And Jamie's like, art is not part of the plan. The plan is GW magnet school and then like great college. Like that's just what the plan. That's what it's got to be. So she's like trying to focus on science and all that stuff, but she's not particularly good at it. So we see her in a place of like she doesn't quite know who she is or like what her thing is, but she knows what she's supposed to be, or at least what she thinks her parents want her to be, and she's trying to live up to that. Enter pregnant mom, 5 babies, and like all hell breaks loose. Like the babies are born, and suddenly her parents are incredibly swamped, which is naturally what happens when you have 5 newborns. And like I said, they're a working class family, so they're also very strained monetarily. And Jamie, she loves her family and she like wants to help, but she also realizes that her parents are now distracted with these babies. And so now her new brothers and sisters have given her this newfound freedom that she uses she doesn't know what to do with it. So she's just like, I'll join art club for the hell of it. So she joins art club, and it actually turns out that she's pretty good at, like, she's a pretty good artist. She draws really well, and she starts sort of drawing reflections of her life at home, which has now just been like usurped by these 5 babies. And her art teacher really encourages her and is like, your perspective is really interesting. So she starts drawing her brothers and sisters, which means that she spends a lot of time sort of in their space, but like with them kind of individually. Meanwhile, there's this new nurse, like they get a nurse to help out her mom and her dad. And this new nurse comes in and is real sort of like super nanny about it. And is like, I'm going to make all of these babies. She's also British. I'm not doing a British accent. And I don't know what that was. But she's like, I'm going to make all of these babies synchronized. And I'm going to get them on a schedule. And like she comes in, really gung-ho to like drill sergeant the hell out of this nursing 5 newborn situation. Obviously, that fails miserably. And she quits on them. And, the family is like, oh, crap, what are we going to do? But then, someone comes in to save the day. It's our favorite global get down general badman manager. He's previously in the Cheetah Girls. I'm sure he was in this first, but he's now called Albert in this film. And he's like, hey, like you got 5 babies. That's money. So her parents, they need the money, and they're like, oh, if this can help, like we can put stuff away for our kids to go to college and stuff like that. So they, they jump on the bandwagon and they sort of put their trust in Albert, and the Quints career, like really takes off. And, now they're doing commercials, and, the newspaper that her mother runs that used to be filled of her, bad 12-year-old English poetry is now filled with pictures of the Quints, updates on what the Quints are doing, because they're the first Quints ever born in the state. And that's, a big deal. And everybody's like really excited about it as a concept. But Jamie starts to notice that like her siblings are being treated as a unit and not as individual babies. And she doesn't really like that. So she kind of tries to show her, she concocts this thing where she switches the babies in the bassinets to test her parents to see if they can, tell the kids apart. And they really can't. And that's sort of an eye-opener of sorts to, everybody involved that, like maybe they should step back and think about it a little bit more. But, then Albert comes in and he's, national commercials and stuff like that. So they kind of get sidetracked again for a little bit. And, while this is also going on, Jamie finally gets her first A on the report card, and it's in art, but she's like really excited about that. So she's really excited for her parents to come to parent-teacher conference. And, at the commercial where she's supposed to get a chance to, finally join the fray and like be a part of the Quints, or be a part of this family that is being put on sort of the national stage, Albert gets her a really crap role in the commercial, so she refuses to come out, which fair enough. Like 13, I'm not dressing up as like in a diaper for anybody either. But at that, she's like, hey mom, like, parent teacher conferences tonight. And her mom's like, yeah, of course. Like definitely gonna do the parent teacher conferences. Like, but then they forget. And Jamie is sort of starting to realize the other side of this like newfound freedom and her parents being distracted is that they are actually distracted, and some things for her are probably going to fall to the wayside. And, that that really upsets her, because she feels like she's finally finding something that feels good for her and like represents who she is, and she wants to share that with her parents. She kind of wants to show them that she's finally starting to like see her own plan for how things could work, and they're just not sort of available, or receptive to receive that from her. So she kind of tries to talk to them about it. It doesn't really work out that great. And then, but like, she, like, when she finally sort of begins to let them know how she's feeling about it, they are like, oh my goodness, like, sorry, like, that we love you so much and we want to be there for you. So she tells them, like, guys, guess what? Like, I got into this art show. I was chosen for this art show at school. It's kind of a big deal. Like, please say that you'll come, and all of that. And they're like, of course we'll come. But then Albert shows up and lets them know, like, guys, guess what? You have been chosen as Parents of the Year by the governor. And they're super excited about that. And she's really excited for them, too, because, she thinks that they deserve it. And she loves her parents. And she wants them to have that award and get some recognition that, like, they're, like, for once, it's actually not about the Quints. It's about her parents. And she's excited to, like, for them to have that. And then she realizes that the governor's dinner is on the exact same night as her art show, and they didn't even think about her art show. So she gets really sad and runs to school and rips up all of her pictures of her brothers and sisters, because she's just like deeply, deeply hurt. But then her little brother gets sick. Adam, who's the oldest of the Quints, the first one to come out, like, he gets this really bad fever, and she rushes to the hospital in the middle of school. And essentially, it's just a moment where her and her parents, they all realize, like, like, this baby was sick, and it wasn't all of the Quints. It was just this little boy. And, like, we have to, like, look out for him. And just this moment of everybody gets, like, a little bit of cathartic emotional relief of, we have to pay more attention to each other and, like, care about each other, love each other, not just looking at the big picture plan all the time. Which also leads them to fire Albert because he really tries to talk about replacing their sick child so that the others could do a commercial. And they're like, yeah, you got to go. So they're still going to go to the dinner, and Jamie decides, like, to not mention the whole, art show thing, because she comes to the conclusion that, her parents are probably only going to be Parents of the Year once. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and there will be more art shows, which is, very sort of grown up of her to do, in my opinion. And she and Zoe and Brad volunteer to babysit the Quints while they go to the dinner. As soon as they leave for the dinner, Jamie realizes that actually they were supposed to bring the Quints. So now her and her two best friends have to bring these babies to the governor's dinner. And it's this whole series of events. They have to take the van breaks down that her art teacher was going to drive them using. And instead of this man getting these children and 5 infants a cab, he really sends them on a bus, which is crazy to me. But they take a bus, then they take a train, then they got to hop on with a motorcycle gang to get these babies to the governor's place. And when they get there, they deliver the babies. The governor's happy. It's Mr. Furley, fun facts. The governor's happy. And he's like, oh, like, I'll have my driver take you home. And she's like, actually, can the driver take me to my art show that I was going to miss to look after my siblings? So she goes, and as soon as she leaves, her parents realize where it was that she would go other than home, and they feel like horrible. So they show up with the governor and the babies at her art show, where she just won, like, the blue ribbon, which is something that she's never, like, won. And they get to see that, she's doing this spectacular thing, and she lets them know that, like, hey, like, I think I might want a new plan. And they're like, we just love you. We want you, like, to just be happy, do what you got to do. And yeah, so they, like, make up, and we find out that, she ultimately doesn't go to GW Magnet, even though she gets in because she gets a great recommendation from her art teacher. She decides that she wants to go to, like, Milford High, where they have a better art program, and that's what she wants to pursue. So it all just sort of works out in the end, and that is the story of how, in Quints, the quintuplets changed Jamie's life.
Yeah, so with that, I think we'll take a small break, and we'll be right back with the review. Hey guys, so now let's get into the review of Quints. So like we said earlier, our fave, Kimberly J. Brown, and then also Shadia Simmons and Craig from Degrassi, whose name I can't think of right
I
now.
love that we really just chose to not look that up. We're like, everybody knows who Craig is. Like,
It's Craig from Degrassi. You know exactly who he is.
Oh, Lordy.
Our Canadian king. Uh, but yeah, so I think this one was interesting in terms of how they talked about the amount of pressure that parents especially, but like families can put on their kids and then how that manifests in the children. Repeatedly in this, we hear Jamie saying like, you can tell she doesn't really care about science and yet is trying so hard to get into a science specific magnet.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like it's at odds because she's not very good at it, nor does she seem to like
it.
care about it.
Enjoy
So
it.
it's like it's a little odd, but then you start finding out this because that's what that's what her dad had put in the plan. Like he's like, you're going to do well, you're going to be great in science, and you're going to go to GW Science Magnet School, and like that's just the plan for you, and then you're going to go to college. I think it was very interesting just to like see an example of like that dynamic of like just that amount of pressure, because it's not really healthy for kids. And especially if you're not showing promise in that area. I think that's what really seemed the most odd thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Is I was like it seems like her dad picked something arbitrarily when she was like 4 or 5,
Mm-hmm.
and was like, what's going to be a guaranteed way for her to go to a good college or something, and he's like, science and math, so like I need to make sure that she's like on the science track, but then clearly didn't show much of an aptitude for it.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't know why that plan did not adjust.
Yeah, and I think it's like and I also find it interesting because you see that he is not very academic either. But he does have ambition. Like he clearly feels that we watch him. He's taking night classes or something of that nature to get his college degree, because we surmise that he probably didn't. He probably just went to work straight out of high school. That seems to be the general idea, and didn't get a college degree. And he feels that if he can get a college degree, he can maybe get a better promotion at work and make more money for the family, in theory, to be able to do things like send his daughter to college, all of which gets expedited and exaggerated when there are now 5 more children to send to college. There's a great line like in the middle of the night when he's like up working on his schoolwork after, I think, also trying to figure out how he can do like 70 hours of overtime in a week, which is actually literally impossible. And his wife comes to him with a cup of coffee. He just looks up and he's like, we have to send 6 kids to college. We can't afford coffee. That's just not an option anymore. But I think that that's also reflective of, because I think the pressure being put on kids. And like I said, it's interesting that he's so focused on her being very academically strong, even though maybe he's not as academically strong and she might have that from him, I think we've talked a lot on this podcast about the way in which, putting too much pressure on, like, yes, give them a boost and encourage them to challenge themselves. But, there is a tipping point where that can become a negative influence, and it can, actually stifle a child in their attempts to sort of grow and try new things if they feel that they can only do certain things. But what I like about this film in that same vein is that it does highlight not just the way that children can feel that pressure, but the way that, parents and families put them, or the heads of families put that pressure on themselves. Which we see manifest in this particular film as, these parents, because they are so focused on attempting to provide for these kids, they forget to learn about these kids. They forget to spend time with these kids, to get to know these kids. And, they're both expressions of love. They are deep expressions of love. But, in the ideal world, it's an attempt to strike a balance. The reality for many families across the globe is that balance doesn't exist. And it often does end up falling into the realm of, all right, but it turns into, I'm just trying to make sure that you eat, and that you can go to school, and that you can have a better life than I'm capable of. Maybe not that I'm capable of giving you but that I was capable of having. And this is one of those films that sort of asks, like, in the attempt to do that, in the attempt to love in that way, which, as I said, is a very real way to love and a very important way to love. What potentially gets sacrificed, and what do we lose out on? And how can sometimes, like, attempting to follow this plan that we are so sure is going to, create the best situation for everyone involved, like, in what ways do we cut ourselves off from being adaptable and mutable and flexible, and seeing how other things can pop up and surprise us that actually fundamentally make our lives better, even though they deviate.
Yeah, and I think we've actually talked about this before on the podcast. I cannot remember what episode or what movie we were discussing, but I also think it's because a lot of parents parent their kids how they wish they were parented,
Yeah.
instead of actually adapting the parenting to their children's needs. Because I feel like what then happens, and this kind of shows it, I think, is that her father in this case probably wished that somebody had been there to push him, and then maybe he had had a spark in science at some point, and he thinks like, oh, if only I had been able to, if somebody had only given me the opportunity to do X, Y, and Z, I could have been this XYZ, a scientist, a doctor, XYZ,
Yeah.
And so then he's putting that onto his daughter, because he's like, that's how I imagine I would have wanted to be parented, and how I would have wished that somebody would have cared for me and would have shown their love for me. So now I'm going to do that to you, because that's what would have worked for me, instead of being like, I'm going to do for you what seems to be working for you as you get older and evolve. So yeah, I definitely think that that's a big part of it, and it is a very real thing to, at the end of the day, parents are like, well, I'm just making sure that you can eat, going to that like basic survival,
Yeah.
like, making sure your child survives. So yeah, I think I think it's always a complicated thing, because to an extent parents do need to kind of give you a sort of pressure, because like if they don't, depending on the child you have, they're not going to care. So again, like I said, I feel like everything goes back to, everything should be tailored to your child, because there are also kids who are just very diligent and very like studious, like just as people.
Yeah.
And you don't really have to do anything extra and they'll be fine, but it's like, if you have a kid that's a little bit more like, you got to kind of push them a little bit, you got to have to adjust. And I think that's the thing, is a lot of parents don't do that. And that's what he's kind of do. Like, everything is very rigid and everything is very static with him. It's like, you have to have a plan. It has to be written down. You have to know what you're doing next. And it's like, well, that's not how life works,
Yeah. And her mom, like, definitely has a bit of that too. I think that there's a moment where she literally says something along the lines of, if I were, I forget exactly what it is that she says, if this had happened, but she's like, but I could have been editor of the New York Times by now,
Yes, she's like, if my parents, I think she says, if my parents pushed me, or if she had gone to college.
Yeah, it's something like that. Essentially, that's why I'm telling you, that's why we're doing this with you. And in all fairness, I will say, in the movie, I think they do a good job of showing that Jamie doesn't express, hesitation until sort of this moment, at least to her parents. This is a moment where, when she's finally finding something that she is good at, that's when she expresses, like, wait, like, maybe we have to change the plan.
Right.
Also, you guys just had 5 children that you didn't mean to have, so maybe we really have to change the plan. And
we all need
fairness,
to adjust.
Yeah, they are fairly, receptive to that. And her dad in particular, I really like the relationship that they show with how her dad he's so receptive to it. He's so quick to sort of say, oh, wait, how can I be forgetting you? Like, my first one, the light of my life for literally the vast majority, well, not the vast majority of it, but for the last 13 years.
Right.
I think it might have been Double Team that we were talking about, this sort of situation.
Yeah, it was.
I feel like that's and yeah, he's very different from that dad. Not very different from that dad, It's the same like fundamental drive, but his response is a bit just quicker.
Yeah.
But that's also not like that's based on real stories, so there's
Yeah.
that too. But I do think, and in this movie they sort of get this opportunity because of like the potential fame of their kids that allows them to exploit that, and therefore I think in this movie there's a situation where the room is made for like the plan to be something that is able to be moved on from. But I do really want to like, I think that it is also, there is a luxury in being able to like deviate from the plan, like, and a luxury in sort of being able to do anything but think about providing, even as far as thinking about tailoring parenting for each child and all of that kind of stuff. Like it's, I don't know, I think that's one of those things where, like we've said many a time, it's deeply complicated, but we sort of see all these examples of like ways in which that like always works out. But I think it's just, I don't know, it's one of those things I always like to remember, that like for the vast majority of people literally on this planet, like there's not even the leisure to consider, how am I going to parent a child, or how am I going to raise a family, how am I going to look after a family, how am I going to look after myself. You just have to do it. And because there's only so much opportunity, or there's only so many ways to like provide. And it's a movie that made me think about that. So yeah. I appreciate that. It's always good to put those sort of perspectives in line.
Well, and I also think that it's something that we had also talked about, is the fact that her father literally is like, you would be the first college grad in our entire family. And so she's a first generation, she would become the first generation college graduate. And I know we were talking about how you don't really see that a lot with white families. Not saying it doesn't exist, but it's like,
it's not showcased.
It's not shown as often in like in American media. I mean, granted, like we said, this was in 2000, so things are very different in 2021 than they were in 2000. So, but it is an interesting thing, because it might have been that the way her parents grew up, they couldn't deviate.
Yeah.
Like they very much might have grown up in environments where it's like, listen, you graduate high school and you go straight to work. We don't have money for college. We don't have any way for you to get to XYZ next place. Like all we have to do is, we're making sure that you survive, and that's what it is. So then her parents, maybe were able to push through to that next level, where now they had some level of comfort, and they can be like, look, we want you to do this specific thing. But like you said, they do have a luxury that now they can deviate if she wanted to. So yeah, I think it's interesting, and then also just interesting that they did choose to show a first generation future college attendee that was white.
Yeah. Although I think that there is a big note there, that I do think in 2000 I think that was a bigger conversation. We were just smaller.
Right.
And so weren't, because I think that's the whole thing. Like that's the rhetoric that we grew up with. Go to college, you should go to college, you should go to college. And that was just a general American shift.
And a recent one.
Yeah. And I think, again, piggybacking off of like the economic upturn of like the 80s and such like that. Where like now, like this thing's like, oh, like we have generations that like generally the country's doing better. So now all of these blue collar people who before absolutely could not afford these things, and now there are programs and all this stuff, and everybody should go to college. That's how you're going to get your leg up. And that was the rhetoric. So in 2000, for a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old, so someone who was born in 1987, like that was very much probably a real thing, especially for blue collar white America. I guess I would imagine in that time frame.
And a new rhetoric for sure, because that means her parents would have been born probably like the late 60s or something.
Yeah. So somewhere in there.
Somewhere in that, but very much grew up in the 70s. Yeah. Where I feel like that's when things started to shift in like,
yeah, for sure.
That idea of like you going to college was was still relatively new for your average person.
Yeah. But was becoming more and more of like a necessary part of, having
A
a
good job.
close to middle class existence in America.
Right. Yeah. So
Um,
that definitely was interesting, and I think you do kind of see it in a different light now. But yeah.
yeah. I mean, but I do also, in that realm of just thinking about families, like I know that we did have a question as we were watching it about just like why were they so helpless? Not that, I mean, like anybody who ends up with 5 babies at one time, like you're automatic, everybody's helpless in that situation, and those babies run you. But like I was just confused watching. I was like, where's grandma, or grandpa, or a cousin, or
Aunt,
a
uncle.
friend? Like, where is the rest of the family? Like, why did y'all have to go, across the Atlantic to find your nurse? Like, I'm confused. Like there should have been like that was very strange to both of us. I know we noted it as we were watching.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I come from a place and from a culture where, everybody raises all the kids. My sister was born and my grandmother came up from Jamaica. That's what happened to help look after the kids. Like that babysitter that I referred to earlier was my mom's childhood best friend mother, who also came up from Jamaica to like help look after me and my sister. So that's not even like blood, but still family. So it's just I've always found that a little bit odd about American culture that I've seen projected to me on the screen, that like extended family seems to be pretty small and or absent.
I'd specifically say white American culture because I feel like you don't see the same
Fair enough.
because it's true. Like you don't see that when
Yeah.
it comes to, African Americans or even like Asian Americans or Latinx Americans. Because I mean, even if you think about like Wendy Wu, like they literally lived with her grandmother.
Yeah.
And it was like this cousin just drops in and nobody is shocked. Like it's just like she's like, he's just here. And they're like, okay. Because it's just, the idea of living with your extended family is normal. And it's not
and Sugar Mama lives with them on the Proud Family too.
Yeah, so I feel like it's definitely like white America. You don't really see that though. Like you hardly ever see multiple generations in one house.
Or
And if
nearby.
you do, it's like a big thing. Like it's like part of the whole plot. It's like, oh,
yeah,
well,
grandma's coming for the weekend. Dad's upset.
Because even Good Luck Charlie, they didn't have any of their family either. Now that I'm thinking about it, like I'm like they didn't have any of their family helping out when they now have what 4 or 5 kids, 5 kids by the end of the series.
That's incredible.
Like it's just wild, but it is a very interesting aspect of like white culture that I think I don't know if I can't necessarily say if that's always true. I don't think it's always true, but it's definitely in the media what they tend to show. It's just like it's a very nuclear family and like that's it, and maybe you go and see your grandparents like once a year and that's it.
Yeah. Whereas, I definitely like my first friends growing up were my cousins.
Right. It's a different situation.
And yeah, and I know that to be true for like not just me, but like a lot of the like kids I grew up around, or a lot of the kids that the people I've interacted with, that are not of like, your classic white America. So
yeah,
that was interesting. But yeah, it's a very useful thing. Like it's very useful to have like, even I'm not gonna necessarily say like extended family, but an extended network.
Yeah.
Like close friends.
It's a village. It's that classic
exactly.
trope,
Like,
it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
You need a village.
And it can't, and like and that village should be beyond just like the elementary school teachers around you, and you know what I mean, like, and like the neighbor. Like it should be like it should be an emotional village, people that you have chosen as like, I mean, or the people you're stuck with, but like also the people you have chosen to be like your family, who you trust and love and all of those things.
Right.
So yeah, like that was kind of interesting to see playing itself out.
I think something
But
else
yeah, go ahead.
I think something else we had talked about was also the idea that like the Quints are um shown out so early. Like it's just like the idea that they became this
Immediately.
brand within like 4 days of them being born, and then were further like given endorsements and brand deals for their entire 5 months. Like it was just wild because I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that if I like got older and then found out that my parents basically put me on like every single trademark and brand that they could have.
Pimped you out, that they pimped you out as a
Yes.
baby.
Yes.
Now we like here's my thing with this though. Like I'm like it is really I think how I would feel would completely depend on the outcome. So I think if I at 20 was miserable and felt unloved and like my parents didn't care about me and then I found out that they pimped me out as a baby, I'd be like, yo, y'all are trash, right? Like that's probably what my response would be. But if at 20, like I'm like, Mom, Dad, I'm about to like graduate school or I'm like in the workforce now, I know what to do. And they're like, actually, like we have this fund that's been stored away from you that has like, a couple 100,000 in it from those years that you don't remember when we had you in front of cameras. um, and I felt loved, like I felt like they had like looked after me my whole life and they were there for me and all that. I probably would be like, that was real smart of you, Mom and Dad. Like, go ahead and make that money. Because I mean, like now I'm chilling and I can start with a leg up. So I think it weirdly comes down to like, again, it's just like, what is that coupled with? If you're doing something in place of loving and looking after your children, which is the trajectory that these parents like seem to kind of go down. And thankfully they have an older child to like stop them in their tracks with that. Before they get too caught up in it. Like if you do that, if you sort of ignore the child and treat that child as a commodity, then it's going to be a problem. And that child's going to feel that. But if if like, I guess it's the difference between like pimping out the kid and just like a little side hustle. That's how I see it. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with a side hustle, all right? Like, everybody's got the little things that they do. There's nothing wrong with side hustle. I come from a long family of side hustlers. But yeah, but like, don't make your child into a dollar sign. Like that's not that's not okay. We've seen how it goes with child stars. It's not pretty.
No, that's why a lot of them have to get emancipated or don't have enough money when they get older. Yeah, it can
A
get
whole
very
mess.
complicated. But yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway is like, don't make your child a dollar sign because that's what they were almost doing to those kids. It was
Yeah.
like, yes, they were trying to meet an end, which was like, we need to have 6 college funds and we kind of got to start building that post haste. So it was like, yes, because both of you very much have like, like you have like lower paying jobs. Like the dad's a department store manager at like a Bed Bath and Beyond type store, and then the mom is a local publisher of her own newspaper that I don't know if people bought or not because
Milford
she also
Weekly.
included her daughter's poems in it every week.
Well, it started selling when the Quints were pictured.
Right,
That was
but I'm like, you weren't making money, so he was the only one bringing in money. Basically, y'all weren't living off of a lot of money. And
exactly.
so I'm like, you definitely would not have been able to send that many kids to college off of his salary.
One of y'all better get real good at a trade.
So it's like it made sense, but it was still just like, my God, like you don't even know how to tell your kids apart anymore.
That's also very because it's like that's something that like even with multiple children, like mothers can do that pretty quickly, like almost immediately. Like
yeah, I
within
feel like
days.
the moms almost always know who is who.
Like yeah, no, that's the other one. But yeah, I don't know. I think I ultimately come down like I do like that at the end. Like there's a moment where they sort of say when Jamie's kind of like, oh, like can there be a new plan? Or maybe I've found like a different version of the plan. And, her parents or her dad is like, dude, the whole point of the plan has always been for you to be happy. And I don't think that they say this outright, but like that recognition of like, if the pathway that involves college is going to make you happy, like then the plan is for you to take that. The pathway that doesn't involve college is going to make you happy. That's the plan for you to take that. It's just that, I think what's important is that we kind of always have to remember that happiness, like you can be happy without luxury for sure and without excess.
Mm-hmm.
But you do need a basic level of like comfort in the sense of having enough, right? Like it's not that you're not wanting for anything, but there isn't something that you're fundamentally lacking that is a necessity to survival. Like you're not hungry or you're not cold. And it's like, but at the end of the day, it's like if you have that, like if you see that your kid is like, really good at woodwork, just fucking awesome, so cool. Like woodwork is one of like the coolest things of it. Or like, like I love that my dad like knows how to sew, and I've always thought that like tailoring and stuff like that is so cool. Like, yeah, maybe your kid doesn't need to like go to college, but they have a skill that they can provide for themselves with. So they'll be fed and they'll be happy. Like they'll be doing something that they enjoy, or at least something that doesn't make them miserable or make them feel like they exist in, the C grade of life. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they're not the C list, whatever. It's like, this is my thing and I'm good at it. And I don't like, I don't need all of the excess, but I'm happy. Because I really do think that is fundamentally, children or not, like, isn't that everybody's plan, to just kind of be happy.
Exactly. No, you can't. The other thing is, most of the time you can't really program children. Like it's like,
oh, how
you can
easy
do,
the world would be if we could.
yeah, you can't, sometimes you can set them on a path, definitely. But, half the time kids that say that they're going to do X, Y, and Z and then go all the way through college and then they graduate and they're like, I didn't want to do this. Like,
And even beyond that,
really
like,
yeah,
people would be
it's
like 35 and be like, yo, I hate this. Like, I'm going to go and do
right.
something completely different.
And then they end up doing whatever they actually wanted to do, but they felt like this entire time they had family or parental pressure that they had to do X, Y, or Z. So it's like, you can do certain things, but at the end of the day, like your kid's their own person. They're gonna do what they want to do. Because even with the Quints, it's like, you guys can say for college, but probably one or two of them just might not want to go.
Yeah, just and that's just like pure statistics. Like the odds are you have 6 kids, like like 1 or 2 of them are probably gonna figure something else out that isn't like that particular path. So
yeah, no, so yeah, it is. It's definitely one of those things that it's one of those movies that definitely makes you think about that and all the pressures and then how much people put on children from such an early age.
Yeah.
But also it's like it makes sense because we live in America, which is like uber capitalist, and kind of the only way to make it typically, there's a specific way you got to do things. So it's like
if you're not born with the money, you got to make it real fucking fast.
Exactly. So it's very haves or have nots. And so yeah, it's like I get it, but it is definitely a little bit, it's different for everybody and how they want to treat it. But with that, do you think you would show this one to your children?
I mean, I still enjoy this one. I actually really do think that the way that it's crafted, like the way that they have her narrating it, is fun. I mean, like it's corny writing and all of that because, it's a kids movie, but on TV. But it's like I like the way that they do that. I think that it's the type of film that like has no harm. It's a good, like, it's the type of film like my kids will watch and they'll maybe learn something, maybe they won't. Regardless, like I remember when I was a kid, just like the concept of seeing 5 babies at once was like, it's like the way that Beethoven will always be popular. You know what I mean? Just like, oh my god, a huge dog, hijinks ensue. It's like, oh my god, 5 babies, hijinks ensue. Like it's just like a fun little premise. So I mean, I don't know if I will go out of my way to show it to them, but I have no objections to them stumbling upon it. Maybe I'll show them that diary entry if they do.
You should. I think yeah, I mean, I feel like this is like a fun one. I feel similarly though, where I'm like, this isn't a must watch. Like
Yeah,
it's just kind of like it's okay, it's a decent one. But if I want to show you the best work of Kimberly J. Brown, I would Halloween is the must see.
obviously,
Yeah, for obvious
obviously,
reason. And Shadia, it's,
color
color of
French.
friendship. So, yeah, it's like everybody is I feel like it's fine. Like it's literally just fine. If they brought it up and they're like, "Oh, I'd want to see it," sure, but I don't think I would be like, "You guys should watch Quints."
Yeah.
I also feel like there's so much like multiple children programming on TLC these days that they basically could see Quints on a docu-series and it would be fine. Uh,
Although I don't know if that might be what I tell them not to watch. I might be like, you're not allowed
I'm
to
just
watch
saying,
that.
if they want to see multiple children, there are at
There
least
are
three
many
docu-series
ways.
on right now
Yeah.
that
Or
will.
the entire Mary Kate and Olsen suite. Like that's also always an option.
Our twins.
Our twins. But yeah, I think that's a fair read. It's still like if you want to. I think if you want to rewatch it, you can rewatch it. It'll be fine still.
Yeah,
Craig is very sassy in this.
he
He's got a
is.
lot of he's got a lot of things to say, and he has no problem saying them, which we appreciate. Kind of like an early version of Gordo. Lizzie McGuire.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, it was a pleasant rewatch, but I don't think I need to do that again.
No, it didn't break the mold. It's not one that we definitely be like, go on and watch right now. It's like, nah, if you feel like it, sure, but like unless you really like Kimberly J. Brown and Don Knotts, I guess, who makes a cameo at the end. Sure.
He is
But
great as that mayor. We love, oh God, the Quints.
he is great. I mean,
That.
a
R.I.P.
great
Yeah.
actor. Yes, a great actor from the Andy Griffith Show.
And Three's
But
Company.
and Three's Company, yeah, he did both. Just great. He's prolific. But yeah, so I would agree with that. I think it's decent. Rewatch it if you feel like it, but don't feel moved. If you're not. And I think with that, we will see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Critics Kingdom. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and SoundCloud so you can stay up to date, as well as interacting and letting us know what you guys think on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Critics Kingdom and on Instagram at The Critics Kingdom. We're excited to talk to you again next week.